Well, joining us now for another agronomic update with our friends at LG Seeds. Let's have a conversation about corn rootworm, which is something I know is a pesky problem for many growers throughout the Midwest, and looking at northern corn rootworm across the upper Midwest. Joining us now to tell us more and have a conversation, he is LG Seeds agronomist covering Minnesota. Brian Tertis is with us here today on the show. Brian, it is good to talk with you. Hope all is well.
Yeah, things are looking great out there. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Real quick for starters, how have the crops been looking in your territory here as we're getting into the home stretch of the 2025 growing season, Brian?
I'd say in general, things look really good. So, I mean, there's a few pockets that have gotten a little excess moisture that have caused a few drownouts, but for the most part, we're looking very good. Do have a little bit of a challenge with the some rootworm feeding actually this year, and that's why we decided to use that for a topic. So.
Yeah, well, let's get into that a bit. And as I mentioned, I know corn rootworm is very pesky for folks to deal with. And so maybe for starters, how do we scout for corn rootworm? What are some key things that you would mention as we try to manage rootworm in our cornfields?
So scouting for corn rootworm will be kind of starts the year before. Actually, you want to kind of there's traps available, sticky traps that you can use to kind of scout to see how many beetles are in your fields the year before, and you can use those to help you decide how you want to approach the treatment of it the following year, whether you want to use traits or insecticides, or if you're good with just a rotation or above ground traits, and just helps kind of direct where you want to go with your decisions on how to manage that. When you get in season, you want to see how the control's been. You can start. Usually they say the rootworm larvae start hatching about the same time you'll start seeing the fireflies out. So that'll give you an idea on when you should start getting out and kind of doing a little paying attention to how things are going. The best way to scout for the actual larvae, though, is that during at least up this far north during July is a good time to dig roots up, and then what we call floating them, and you put them essentially in a 5-gallon bucket of water and let them sit there for 10 to 15 minutes, and give that a good time to soak and see how many rootworm larvae float up to the top. So.
Well, and I think about this, and it almost sounds like it's a year-round kind of process here when it comes to corn rootworm. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the extended diapause of northern corn rootworm and how that all kind of plays a role here, Brian.
Yeah, so that's the extended diapause is a challenge that we've been seeing a little bit more the last few years up here, kind of in Minnesota and some of the other northern states. It's one that challenges us because you can have yourself do the rotation of corn soybeans like a lot of guys like to do, but you still have the possibility of having the rootworm feeding a year after you're having soybeans there. This is because the northern corn rootworm, depending on the state, the population, it can be anywhere from 14 to 50% of that population could have what they call an extended diapause. And what that essentially is that the rootworm eggs do not hatch essentially for they overwinter twice is what they need to do before they hatch. If that happens, then you end up with them hatching again into a corn crop, and they begin feeding, and you see rootworm damage that you weren't necessarily expecting to have because you had soybeans the year before.
So thinking about that, obviously it's important to rotate traits and rotate crops and things of that nature, but you still have to be vigilant, I guess I would say, with extended diapause in mind, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's correct. And the one of the better ways to determine if you think you might have the extended diapause is you actually need to start scouting that one 2 years beforehand. You want to put out your sticky traps, kind of pay attention to what kind of beetles you have in your cornfield 2 years ahead of time, because that'll give you a good idea on whether you might encounter that pest again 2 years down the road when you move to corn back into that field again. Some of the thresholds aren't very well established. Some of the suggestions out there is you should find about 4 beetles per plant, or if you use sticky traps, 2 to 4 beetles per day on a trap is what they're kind of consider the threshold for that. But I don't. It's tough because it depends a little bit on the year too. A lot of years there's probably feeding. We don't necessarily see it. Well, there's a year like this where we have so much moisture and so much wind that the roots don't quite have as much to hold on to, and they tend to tip over a lot easier. And we're seeing a fair amount of goosenecking out there from this pest.
Brian, what are some things that folks should consider when selecting corn hybrids then for the upcoming growing season when we're thinking about, really that management starts, here I'm thinking after harvest, we get into this fall, winter, and get into the spring, et cetera. So, I mean, how does the selection of a corn hybrid play a role here?
So my advice is always select the genetics that best fit your acre. But after that step, select the traits that most fit the pests you believe you're going to have the following year. If you're concerned about the extended diapause northern corn rootworm in your field, a good choice is a lot of times is the Duracade trait that we have in several of our hybrids, such as 51C62D and our 52C90 DV. Both of those have the Duracade trait. They've shown some pretty good resistance to the northern extended diapause corn rootworm out there. I've seen a few plots where the above ground trait has actually goosenecked, whereas those with a below ground trait, such as the Duracade trait, have stood fairly well and tolerated that very well.
What other thoughts and reminders would you share just when it comes to corn rootworm management? What are some things that growers, what other things do they need to think about and keep in mind?
So one of the things, especially with the extended diapause, research has actually shown that they tend to be a little worse on the odd years. That was when I first heard that, I said, well, that kind of sounds like a old wives' tale on that type of stuff. But research has actually shown that they do tend to be a little worse on the odd years, and with it being extended diapause, that probably makes a little bit of sense because it's in a 2-year cycle that those things go through, and so that would make me think, well, the odd years ones are the ones that have the higher percent extended diapause as part of the population, whereas maybe the even years it isn't quite as high a percentage, and so you don't get quite as many feeding out there in that. But the considerations should also be the use of soil insecticide to help control that. Some people talk about doing what they call beetle bombing or spraying the beetles when they're out in the field. That can be, the returns on those not always a positive return on investment on that one, but it does help, I think, some with the peace of mind on taking care of the beetles that are in the field, knowing that they won't be able to infect the or lay the eggs for the following year. So.
A lot of things to think about, and I look at it from the end of the day, there's so many things that can be done and a lot of things scouting wise and more we need to do. And corn rootworm is something that unfortunately growers gonna have to contend with. They've contended with it for quite some time, but thankfully there's a lot of different practices and methods and more out there that they can do to try and minimize the impact, I think, is the moral of the story, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's the goal. So I mean, the rootworm, it didn't happen. When we came out with BT traits, that pretty much took care of the European corn borer issue that we had. Well, it hasn't worked out the same way with the corn rootworm. It sticks around, and it's been very shown some pretty good adaptation to the traits and that we've put out there. So we have to be willing to maybe rotate traits, not use the same trait every time, be willing to look at insecticide to help control those that might have shown resistance to the traits that have been put out there. It's a fluent situation. Things move, and you just got to be ready to change with the situation as it comes across.
Well, I know if folks have questions, they can go online, lgseeds.com, reach out to their local LG Seeds agronomist, such as yourself, their local retailer, find information online. A lot of great ways to get in touch and get some advice and learn about products and learn more in general, right, Brian?
Yeah, definitely. The lgseeds.com website has a lot of information. We have several agronomic articles on there, as well as being able to look over our full lineup, especially those Duracades and below ground traits. If the corn rootworm is what your concern is.
Anything else we haven't mentioned today, Brian, or anything you'd want to reiterate to folks as we close out the segment?
Well, just want to reiterate that we're out there. We're willing to partner with the grower, help them work through any of the challenges that they find, and especially with the extended diapause. It's kind of a challenge that work is newer. It's been around a while, but it seems to be a little newer to as in it's popped up again from not being as much of a concern lately. But definitely willing to partner with anybody and help them with their challenges as they see that coming.
Find more information online again at lgseeds.com. Brian Turnus, LG Seeds agronomist covering Minnesota. Thanks for joining us here on the program today. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.